Hey guys, Comet here. Welcome to episode 17 in my Overly Scienced series. In the last episode, I went over this hatch ranch and all of the ratios you want to build everything in. And I also did a lot of terraforming down here in the oil biome. Now someone pointed out in the comment section that having only one layer of ceramic here could be a problem with overpressurization. And so to combat that, I'm not going to put in another layer down here. What I've done, I've put in some hydrosensors next to the oil wells. So once the oil level gets up to the oil well, it will go ahead and turn off that oil well so that I can more accurately match supply and demand. So as demand increases, the crude oil will be drained more quickly, and that'll go ahead and turn on more of the oil wells as the level drops. And then when demand is low, the level will rise back up, turning off more of the oil wells. And since crude oil doesn't really stack up to 1,000 kilograms until you get up really high, I don't think I'm going to be overpressurizing the ceramic down here. Now, if you remember in the last episode how much igneous rock I had close to 5,000 tons, and I've gone through more than half of it already. So what I want to do in this video is put in the liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and then put in the second rocket setup on the other side of the map over here. That way I can start making the regolith melters in the next episode. That way I can start making some more igneous rock so that all of my hatches don't starve to death. And then the very last thing I did in between episodes was I went ahead and split up the power grid. So there's now a right half and a left half. So if you notice these batteries, they're at different levels. That's because the two sides are consuming and producing power at different rates. So if we jump back down to the bottom here, this is the main power supply for the right side of the map now. It's the petroleum boiler 2.0. We can contrast that with petroleum boiler 1.0. And this setup was kind of rough because I needed the power immediately. But now that I have both of them running, this middle one here that burns off the natural gas hasn't really been running at all. So I have quite a bit of natural gas stored up. But this one is basically identical to the other petroleum boiler, except the aquatuner runs the supercoolant through the petroleum tank up here. So instead of having a tepodizer to produce heat, the heat is just taken out of the petroleum up here. That way I'm burning even cooler petroleum to try and save on power using this aquatuner. So if we look at the temperature in here, it's really chilly. And I have 6 petroleum generators instead of 5, and that has to do with the whole buffer up here. I have 2 pumps pumping out petroleum. That's 3 generators per pipe. So if this runs flat out because I need the power, it will eventually consume all the petroleum in here because this pump can only pump out 1 pipe's worth of petroleum at a time. But because there's this buffer here, that allows me to be a little more efficient with the way I consume power. So there's 2 hydrosensors in here. This hydrosensor turns on the pumps, or it enables the pumps when there's sufficient petroleum, because you want to leave a little bit in here so that the supercoolant in the radiant pipe here that the aquatuner is churning actually has some heat to draw on. So that's what that maintains. And then this pump, or this sensor here, it turns on the generators if the pressure in here gets too high. Because I was getting some breaks up here. If I only had 5 generators here, then having a buffer would be kind of pointless, because once the buffer fills up, I would have no way of consuming that buffer unless the pump down here stopped working for some reason. Alright, because this pump can only output 5 generators worth of petroleum per second, but since these aren't running all the time like this pump is, they will never be able to catch up to this pump. So by putting in 6 generators and giving it downtime, it can catch back up. So anytime you're using a buffer, you need to overconsume or you need to have the ability to overconsume what you're putting into the buffer, otherwise there's no point in having the buffer. And then I've just put in the ratioed amount of carbon skimmers. So it's 10 carbon skimmers to 6 petroleum generators, which is actually a really nice ratio. And then I'm just pumping in clean water, and I'm pumping out the 2 pipes of polluted water. So back to the focus of this episode, I'm going to put in the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. If I remember correctly, it's going to look something like this, where I have 2 steam turbines, and then a regular old power transformer. And this power transformer is going to power some components down in here. I don't quite remember, but I'll figure it out. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it looks something like this. We're going to need a total of 3 aqua tuners, 1 to cool the steam turbines, 1 to cool the oxygen, and then 1 to cool the hydrogen. Gotta put in the bypass. This aqua tuner over here actually needs to be rotated. It allows room for the vent from the steam turbine exhaust. And I'm actually going to flip this turbine so that it makes it a little bit more symmetrical. If you run into this scenario right here, where you can put a bridge this way so that the supercoolant can jump over the exhaust pipe, or the exhaust pipe can jump over the supercoolant pipe, you always want to put it this way, because putting a bridge like this will allow heat to move from this room through the bridge into this room. So we're just going to avoid that problem and put the bridge horizontal. And I can snip that. We're going to do the same thing over on this side. That means we're going to need a bridge here and here, so that there's room for the aluminum piping. And I think the buffer can go right here in the middle. Powering these is pretty simple because we're in space. We can use heavy watt joint plates. And that just simplifies things. Now, on the topic of being in space, the only tiles in this build that absolutely have to be insulated tiles are this right here, this right here, and then the tiles that separate the 2 oxygen and hydrogen rooms. Alright, so now for the thermosensors, we're going to put 1 here, 1 here, and then 1 should fit over here. The automation is what I always do. Just put in the buffer gate and connect the thermosensor to the buffer gate, and then the buffer gate to the aqua tuner. Now I can't remember how deep I made these 2 tanks on the other map, so I'm gonna go to about here and see if this is enough space. So temperature shift plates go in as well. I'm going to use copper. The way you do the piping here is actually more important than the material you put into the temperature shift plate, because the supercoolant moving through the radiant piping has more of an effect than anything this temperature shift plate can provide. And there's a reason that it is this wide. So that's 14 tiles. And if we look over here at what is going to be supplying the oxygen and hydrogen, it is 14 tiles. So I'm going to stick one of those right underneath it in about this space right here. Well, it might be up here. Haven't quite figured that out yet. Let's see, so this is 9 tiles tall here, and I'll want to leave 2 so that my dupes can walk in between. So I'm going to need 11 tiles from the base of this whole thing. So if I count up here, the very bottom would need to be at this tile. I think that's enough space. That is, if I want to make it flush with the bottom of this, which would probably look the nicest. Yeah, I'm gonna try and make it flush with the bottom of this. So this will be the base of the oxygen, or the electrolyzers down here. So that's 6 gas pumps, and then we need some mesh tiles. The electrolyzers can... oh, the ladders are in the way. Okay. Well, I can fit one here and here. Now, drywall here is super important, otherwise I'll just lose all of that gas. And I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, but mesh tiles and airflow tiles, in space, they don't let gases go, or they don't let gases escape, but they can pass from the bottom to the top, or the top to the bottom, and they can even occupy that tile. But it won't escape, as long as the rest of the room has drywall, of course. So it's going to look a little closer to this. And as more of it gets filled in, it'll be a little bit easier to see why I do it this way. Now the automation here is the same as the others. I've just got to remember what to set these to. So the one down here that pumps the oxygen is 450. The one up here is 250. So this one, if pressure is above 450, copy that here. And then this one, if pressure is above 250. Now this is the interesting part, figuring out the piping. So the first thing I do is I connect these up like this. Now the priority is going to be to send the oxygen back down to the bases, down this way. But if there's no room to go down, then it will go up instead. So kind of like that. And then the hydrogen, that's pretty simple. It's just going to go over and up. For the plumbing, I'm going to do that big loopy thing again. So this will cool off this room to the temperature of the incoming water. That way these aquatuners up here don't need to work quite as hard to cool off the gas that's going up into this room. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the shutoffs. That means I can use ceramic. But unfortunately, I have to put the floor here instead. So that's the whole point of this power transformer up here, I guess, if I remember back to what I did before. I can power all of these. So to connect all of this up, I'm going to do something like that, with the heavy watt conductive wire bridge here. I don't want this to connect to power yet. That's actually kind of bad. This is going to overheat. I need to deconstruct that before it blows up. Alright, now I can just put it back in now that it's been drained. While we're on the subject of power, I can go ahead and put a bridge here so that I can get these connected up. And I'm going to deconstruct that so that my dupes can actually get in there and work. And then to power all of the stuff up here, I'm going to put a joint plate here. So it's going to look something like this. To extract all of the liquids, I'm going to put a pump here and a pump here. This is going to pump out this way, and then this one is going to pump out this way. Oh, this gap down here is actually important for two things. I remember now. Not only does it house the shutoffs, but it also lets me run the liquid hydrogen through here, and then the return can come back up this way. And I think we might have to dodge that, so we'll put it here, like that. When you're doing liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen for your rockets, you want to always be cycling the liquid. Otherwise, well, unless you're using insulated pipe made out of insulation. But I'm going to be using ceramic, so I'm going to be circulating the super cold liquids. That way it doesn't burst the pipe. When it comes back over here, drops back in, it's going to be recooled so that it can go back out. So this one, the oxygen here is going to pop back in right there. So now I can figure out how the radiant piping is going to go. Actually, I think something like this might look a little bit neater. And then the return can go up there. But now I need another ladder. And then these pumps in here can just receive power from this wire here. That's so many dupes in one area. It's glorious. I think actually I'm going to make this part right here out of insulated piping. That way the coldest point should be down here in this corner. That means I can do something similar to this side. So the coldest point will be here, and then the warmest point will be up here where the oxygen is coming out as a gas when it goes back into the aqua tuner. So this should be detecting the warmest temperature in this room, not the coldest. So I'm going to put in a squiggle here, and then a squiggle there, squiggle here, and then something like that. I suppose I could make it symmetrical by doing that, and then deconstructing that, and then, let's see, we have to snip that, and then this can connect here. So the plumbing should be symmetrical on both sides now. I don't think I need these ladders anymore here, so I'm going to deconstruct those and then put in the hydro sensor right here. Connect that up. Now we need a way to shut off these valves down here if we have too much oxygen up here. So we'll go ahead and put in a hydro sensor right here, and then similarly we need one over here, which means I did deconstruct these ladders a little prematurely. So these hydro sensors up here will control the gas valves that allow the oxygen and hydrogen to enter these rooms. So if this is ever below 500 kilograms, it will open up these shutoffs. And if this is ever below 500 kilograms, it will open up this shutoff. Now we don't want this pump to work until there's about, let's see if I remember right, oxygen stacks to 500. I might have to change this later, and I think hydrogen stacks up to 1,000. So I gotta remove these ladders if I want to fit in the other hydro sensor. Now there is a scenario where you could have enough oxygen but not enough hydrogen, especially when you're first starting it up. So the oxygen is going to fill up before the hydrogen will, and the only way to get more hydrogen is by, well, extracting some of the oxygen, which is always going to be happening because this is what's going to be supplying my bases with oxygen. And if it does get backed up with oxygen, then it's just going to go ahead and turn off these electrolyzers. But if the opposite happens, where it fills up with hydrogen but not oxygen, there's no way to stop these from running by plugging the hydrogen end. You can only stop them from running by plugging the oxygen end. Otherwise you'll start having hydrogen pumped out of these pipes down here, which in turn would break these atmosuit ducts. So you need to have a bypass right here in case we have enough hydrogen but not enough oxygen. And that's really simple to do. All you have to do is put this right here, right after the liquid shutoff. I mean, right after the gas shutoff. That way, if it can't proceed through the gas shutoff, it just goes over to this vent and escapes into space. So it looks like this down here is ready to be sealed up. I need to get some supercoolant into these radiant pipes here, and then I think I can power the whole thing on. Let's see, so to get the supercoolant in, these pipes are in the way, so I'm going to get rid of those momentarily. And I will fill them using a bridge like this. Ooh, and that reminds me, I also need to put in the buffer. So I'll make a little pit right here for supercoolant. Make sure I get some drywall. And then I'll connect it onto the main power grid there. Now all I need to do is seal this up, get some water going. I can do that from right here. I'm gonna come around this way and just connect in to that. And I'm just gonna use this vent down here to fill up this room with water. Then eventually I'll get some hydrogen into this room. I can use the output hydrogen from here, actually. This aqua tuner decided to turn on, so I'm gonna switch that so it doesn't keep running in a vacuum, which means I should probably do the same for the other two. Oh, but here's the water. Okay, we're fine. So for the aqua tuner on the hydrogen side, if we take a look at the properties of hydrogen here, it will solidify at 259.2. And technically there's a 3-degree buffer on that as well. So we can set this because we want to bring the temperature down in this room incrementally until we have a pool of hydrogen that can stabilize the temperature. So for now, if this is ever above -2, we'll say 245, we want it to run. And then for the oxygen, it solidifies at -218. So this is going to run if it's ever above -205. So you want to get the liquids as close to their freezing point as possible before you actually freeze them. That way it buys you as much time in the piping before it starts breaking the piping. Because if it goes into the piping right at its evaporation point, then you're probably going to get some broken pipes. I'm going to put a thin layer of water in here for now to get this power transformer running. That way these shutoffs can turn on so that I can start stabilizing some of the gases in here. I'm going to do that really simply by setting this to output water, and I'm going to enable auto bottle. The more I think about this plumbing, the more I like having it in here instead. So I'm going to have the insulated piping here in the wall where it's hidden, and then I'm going to deconstruct these bridges here. That means I need to put the ladders back in. That means there's a little bit extra space for some piping here. And I'm actually going to extend that out a little bit as well. So I gotta snip that, and that, and that. And then over here, I'm gonna mirror that. So snip, snip, snip. And that should give me a little better coverage. Alright, now that there's a thin layer of water up here, I can connect that back up. And that should... yeah, these have started. So once this up here stabilizes, I'll go ahead and cut the power again. Because I don't want to be wasting all of my water trying to make gas. But if we look at the plumbing now, I think it's a little bit easier to follow. Alright, this is stabilized down here already. That was actually kind of quick. So I'm going to cut that so that these no longer work. And that should equalize the pressure. Now I need to let all of the extra gases in here escape into space. There's some hydrogen stuck in the oxygen, and there's some oxygen stuck in the hydrogen. Okay, it looks like all of the gases have escaped, so I'm going to seal this up. Wait, my dupes can't build that yet. Okay, I'm gonna seal this up, and then, let's see, I think I still need to get some, yeah, I still need to get some supercoolant. Let's see, how do I not do this? I still need to get some supercoolant up into here. Like that. Oh no, wait a minute, I forgot about the ladder. Here we go. Let's get rid of these. I want it to look nice and neat in here. So for this aqua tuner that's going to be cooling these steam turbines up here, it can run if it is ever above 90. I think we're good. I think I can seal these up. And, oop. Don't take out too much supercoolant there. Okay, this loop is running well. These loops are running. Yeah, I think I'm good to connect everything up once this is sealed up. And then I can run this oxygen all the way down through the center to feed this over here, which means I can remove this one. And then once I mirror that whole setup over here on this side of the map, I can go ahead and remove this electrolyzer setup and feed this base with oxygen. Power can go there, and let's hope that this functions correctly. I don't want any oxygen up here, and I don't want any hydrogen over here. That looks like it's working as intended. So there's little bits of oxygen starting to pool up down here. That's good. The hydrogen takes a little bit of finagling. Because there's such a wide range between the oxygen's gas and solid state, there's a lot of room for play in here. Now hydrogen, on the other hand, it's not so forgiving. There's only about 7 degrees you have for margin there. I think I'm going to bring this down a tick, so -2, let's try -250. What you don't want to happen is little bits of hydrogen solidifying down in the bottom here, because once you turn it into a solid, it's really hard to turn it back into a liquid. Okay, I think I've sent enough water up here into this steam room. I need to redirect more of that water into this room, so I'm going to rid of all of this piping here. I can always add more later if I need to. Alright, now all of these electrolyzers are working. So this is in full swing, and these steam turbines have no problem keeping up with all of this. I think I may need to drop this down a couple more degrees. So let's try 253. Eventually I'll find a point where it stabilizes. While this is starting to fill up, what I can do now is deconstruct these old rockets. So the liquid fuel tanks can stay. The engine and the oxidizer tank need to be swapped. So there's hydrogen engine number 1, and here's hydrogen engine number 2. Now we can stop using that gross oxalite. And then on top of the hydrogen engine goes the oxidizer. And it doesn't really matter what order you build these in. I just like putting the oxidizer tank at the bottom. So for the plumbing here, we no longer need petroleum. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to keep the pipe here in case I do decide to run a petroleum rocket using liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. But I think what I'm going to do is just get rid of all of this to make room for the piping here. I'm going to turn this down one more tick, so negative 254. I haven't seen any solid hydrogen yet, so I think I'm pretty safe to do that. But back to the plumbing. So the hydrogen needs to go into the top 3, and the oxygen needs to go into the bottom 2. I think the easiest place to start would be here, where I have the zigzags. Because it's going to be circulating, right, it doesn't matter which order I connect these up in. So for the oxygen, I think I'm going to do something like this. I can go here, and then this one will come out this way, down like that, to close the loop. And for the hydrogen, I'm thinking I'll go up this way instead. Come down right here, like that. So that means this connects up here, this connects up here, and then this one would need to go out this way. And then to get around the oxygen pipe here, what I can do is move the oxygen out one like that, and then I can put a bridge there, and then a bridge here. Then I can connect that, and that. And that should close the loop for both of them. That means all of this piping here is unnecessary. I've got to put in some ladders so that they can finish all of the piping here. And if I put in a ladder... Let's see. I think I may need to deconstruct this part of the rocket, actually. That way I can fit a ladder right here. And then they should be able to reach into there, and they should be able to reach all of that in the middle. When you are building rockets, you have to make sure you set this to 0, because it starts at max, and you don't want to be wasting resources, especially liquid hydrogen, because you might overfill the rocket for what's needed for where you want to send it. If you overfill with one resource, you're going to need to then overfill with the other resource to compensate. A rocket won't launch if you have more oxidizer than fuel, or vice versa. And it looks like the oxygen has started to trigger this here, so it's going to start circulating, which will eventually cool off all of the ceramic to the temperature of the liquid flowing through it. But as long as it keeps circulating and gets cooled back down once it enters this room, that's fine. And that's more of a problem for the hydrogen than it is for the oxygen. If you don't have a lot of ceramic, what you can do, you can use a bridge, so it only costs you 2/3 as much. So you'd put a bridge, a bridge, a bridge, and then you could put piping like that. And you're saving the pipe that goes in the middle right here. Okay, all of the piping is complete, so I'm gonna get rid of these temporary ladders. I'm gonna put the oxidizer tank back in, and since I do have oxygen that's circulating, I'm gonna turn off this pump. That way I have time to actually set this to 0. Next goes the fuel tank number 2, and then fuel tank number 3. And I'm going to set all of these to 0. Now we no longer need these ladders or these gantries, so I'm going to deconstruct both gantries and the ladder. Now that the gantries are gone, I can go ahead and seal this up. And notice here how much quicker this fills up with oxygen than it does with hydrogen. So I need to start pulling some of the oxygen out for the base, that way the hydrogen has a chance to catch up. And it also doesn't help that oxygen only stacks up to 500 kilograms before it makes a new tile. Hydrogen has to stack all the way up to 1,000. So I'm going to redirect all of this piping down into the base. So you see how we have these little bits of solid hydrogen? That's kind of bad. So that means this is too cold. So I need to set this not 254.5, but just straight 254. Hopefully we can get some of this to liquefy. That's what you want to avoid. Don't go any lower than 254. Actually, it looks like 254 is still too low. Let's try negative 253. And this should shut off soon. Actually, let's change this to be below 1. So that should turn off these vents here. Force all of the oxygen down this way. Wait, where is it going? It's not even connected. Ah, I see. There we go. Alright, it looks like this liquefied again. So I'll leave it at 253. What needs to happen here, as the oxygen turns and comes down towards the bases, the piping needs to switch to insulated, because it's going to be coming out of here at whatever temperature the input water is. And so the input water is 64 degrees. That's kind of warm. So I'm going to use insulated piping made of mafic and just run it all the way down right to here where it can connect in. So this one is going to go into here. This one can run this way. And then this final one will run all the way down to this point here. We'll bring down the third pipe here and connect right into there. And I think that's the last of the insulated piping. One little piece left. That means we can disconnect all of this piping here. Connect that to there, connect that to there, and then snip that and get rid of all of this. So we should have plenty of oxygen flowing down into the base, and instead of the hydrogen getting burnt off in the hydrogen generators here, it is going to be used for rocket fuel. So now all of the oxygen is flowing in, and I can get rid of all of this piping. And actually, I can just get rid of this whole thing right here. I don't need any of this anymore. This whole thing can go. And just like that, it's like it was never here. But now I gotta clean up the mess. So we're gonna mop, 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 and then sweep, sweep, and sweep. I'm still getting little chunks of hydrogen here. So I'm thinking negative 252. Yeah, it's instantly freezing as soon as it comes out of this vent up here. Once we build up enough of the hydrogen buffer in here, it should stabilize, like the oxygen did. Alright, it looks like all of the chunks of solid hydrogen here are gone. And as I say that, a new one falls. So it looks like the temperature here you want to set this to is about negative 252. And then as this fills up with more hydrogen, you can increase it to negative 253. And I think the max you ever want to set this to is negative 254. For the oxygen, you want to set it to negative 205. And then this hydro sensor, I have it set to send a green signal when the pressure here is below 1 kilo. Similarly on the opposite side. And then to run this pump over here, I have this hydro sensor set to activate the pump when the pressure is above 500 kilograms. And then over here, this one is going to work when it is above 1,000 kilograms. And actually, I think, if I remember right, I have to set this to 998 because it has to stack up quite high to actually push it over to 1,000. So I'll go through all of the different overlays here. So this is the automation overlay. This is the plumbing overlay. Here is the ventilation overlay. And I think that's pretty much it. So now I have all of these converted over to hydrogen. I am making the hydrogen. I've got all of my oxygen production for the left half of the map isolated to this little section here. And now all I need to do is copy it over on the right side over here. But that is going to happen off camera, because the purpose of this episode was to show you how to build one of them. You know how to build one of them now, so I don't need to bother building the second one on camera. So what I want to do in the next episode is put in the 2 regolith melters, because I am running very low on igneous rock now. So that's about all I wanted to cover in this one. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.